I want to be very clear about something before I begin. I am not a fool. General Zorath of the Dralvek Iron Dominion, commander of the 7th Obsidian Legion, bearer of the Shattered Moon Crest, undefeated in 41 years of active combat across 9 star systems, I am not, by any reasonable definition of the word, a fool. I simply had incomplete data. That is my defense, and I am filing it formally with whatever part of the universe keeps records on embarrassments of this magnitude. Station Meridian 7 sat at the edge of the Veil Corridor, a spinning metal city that smelled like recycled atmosphere and political compromise. I had been assigned there under what my commanding officers called a mandatory cross-species integration assessment, which was a very long phrase that meant the High Dominion Council had decided I needed to spend 6 weeks learning to cooperate with species I had previously only studied from the other end of a weapons scope. I arrived in full formal regalia. Dralvek natural armor is not something we put on, it is something we grow. From birth, our outer plating develops in dense obsidian black sheets, overlapping and interlocking across every vital surface. By adulthood, a fully matured Dralvek warrior carries the equivalent of 3 inches of reinforced ceramic composite on every major muscle group, naturally integrated, naturally regenerating, rated by Galactic Standard Armament classifications at Impact Resistance Level 9. Level 9, out of 10. A level 10 would be a starship hull. I was, in the literal biological sense, a walking fortress. I was also, I would shortly discover, the most confidently incorrect creature in 3 star systems. The integration briefing was held in a long gray room that smelled like cleaning fluid and resignation. Representatives from 7 species were arranged in uncomfortable chairs, and at the front of the room, standing next to a holographic display board and holding a ceramic cup of something warm and steaming, was my assigned combat integration instructor. She was human. Lieutenant Commander Mara Voss, according to the data panel near the door. Age, 31 standard cycles. Species, Homo sapiens. Homeworld, Earth. Rank, Senior Combat Integration Specialist, Galactic Defense Forces. She was 5 feet and 4 inches tall. She was wearing a gray uniform with rolled-up sleeves. She looked like she belonged behind a desk cataloging botanical specimens, not standing at the front of a combat instruction room. Her hair was the color of dried bark, cut short, and she wore an expression of mild professional pleasantness, the way someone looks when they are about to explain something that should be simple but never quite is. She glanced up when I entered. Her eyes were a very calm shade of pale green. "You must be General Zorath," she said. "Welcome. I'm Commander Voss. We'll be working together for the next 6 weeks." I stared at her for a moment that lasted probably 3 seconds longer than was polite. "There has been an administrative error," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "Has there?" "I requested advanced combat integration, threat assessment, close quarters doctrine, interspecies tactical overlay." I gestured at myself, at my plating, at the general concept of everything I represented. I am a decorated general of the Iron Dominion. I have not survived 4 decades of warfare to receive instruction from... I stopped, chose my next word carefully. "Someone of your, configuration." The room had gone slightly quiet. The other trainees, a Venthari with 4 arms, 2 Horvok siblings built like boulders, and a Skethian neural-linked trooper were watching with that particular kind of attention that meant they were deciding whether to feel embarrassed for me or entertained. Mara Voss took a slow sip of her warm drink. "My configuration," she repeated pleasantly. "Right." She set the cup down on the edge of the display table, smoothed the front of her uniform, and looked at me with those pale green eyes that had absolutely no business being as steady as they were. "Tell you what," she said. "Why don't we start with a quick demonstration? Clear the air a little. Sometimes it's easier than explaining." "A demonstration?" I looked around the room. Several of the trainees were making very small, very careful bets with one another. I could see credits exchanging hands with the practiced subtlety of people who did not want the instructor to notice. Of what, precisely? Of why I'm standing at the front of this room instead of behind a desk somewhere. She smiled. It was a small smile, a knowing smile, the kind of smile that should have told me everything I needed to know and somehow told me nothing at all. No weapons, no gear, first contact, your natural plating versus whatever I can manage. She spread her hands, showing empty palms, soft, bare, completely unarmored human hands. Sound fair? It was the most generous handicap I had ever been offered. It was, also, I would shortly understand, not actually a handicap at all. My aide, Shenvak, caught my arm at the edge of the training mat. He was a younger Dralvek, third-generation military, smart enough to have survived 4 rotations without a scratch, which meant he was significantly smarter than he looked. "General," he said quietly, "I have been reviewing the station intelligence files on human physiological data. Good, file a report. I think you should read it after the demonstration, Shenvak." He pressed his jaw together in the way that meant he disagreed strongly but had learned the hard way that arguing with me in public produced no useful results. "Yes, General." That was my last warning. I didn't take it. I stepped onto the training mat. The room had rearranged itself in the way that rooms always do when something interesting is about to happen. The Venthari had 3 of its 4 arms crossed and one hand raised to its chin, studying Mara like a puzzle it hadn't solved yet. The Horvath brothers had stopped pretending to be casual and were now openly staring. The Scythians' neural filaments were flickering, which for their species indicated elevated sensory focus. Mara walked to the center of the mat barefoot. She had taken off her boots. She stood on the gray surface with her weight balanced and her arms loose at her sides and looked utterly, completely, almost offensively relaxed. "Ready when you are, General," she said. I settled into Dralvek war stance, weight forward, plating raised along my spine and shoulders in a ridge that my species had used for 3,000 years to signal to enemies that they had made a serious mistake. My natural armor caught the overhead lights and threw them back in fractured obsidian gleams. I was, objectively, an impressive sight. Mara Voss looked at me the way a person looks at a door they are about to open. I moved. I am fast for a Dralvek, faster than most species expect from something my size. I have led charges that ended wars. I have won duels against opponents half my age. I crossed that training mat at roughly 70% of my combat speed, plating locked, and I reached for her shoulder with the intention of applying controlled grip pressure, enough to make the point, not enough to actually damage a soft species instructor on the first day. She was not where I reached. She had moved with the kind of efficiency that looks, in the moment, almost like teleportation, because your brain simply cannot process the input fast enough to file it under normal movement. She was 2 feet to my left, and her hand was already rising. Her palm touched the plating on my right shoulder. Not a strike, barely a brush. The contact pressure, I would later learn from the sensor logs, registered at approximately 11 pounds per square inch. My obsidian shoulder plate detonated. There is no other word for it. It did not crack, it did not chip. 3 inches of natural Dralvek obsidian, which has deflected plasma bolts and survived decompression explosions, simply ceased to hold itself together. It fragmented outward in a spray of black dust and shards, rattling across the training mat like gravel thrown against glass. I staggered sideways. My plating beneath the shoulder was intact. I was physically undamaged. But the armor I had grown over 41 years, the armor I had never once lost in battle, was drifting to the floor in pieces. The room was silent. Complete, absolute, total silence. Mara lowered her hand and looked at her palm with the mild expression of someone checking for a splinter. She said. Just that. That, said the Venthari very slowly, in a voice barely above a whisper, should not be physically possible. The Horvath brothers appeared to have forgotten how to close their mouths. Shenvak, behind me, made a sound that I believe in his culture indicated the desire to be somewhere else entirely. I stood in the middle of the training mat, surrounded by the remains of my shoulder plate, staring at a 5'4" human woman who had just dismantled part of my anatomy with something she appeared to have considered a gentle greeting. She looked at me. I looked at her. "Again," I said. Maravas blinked. The whole room seemed to take a breath. "Are you sure?" she asked, and there was no mockery in it, just honest inquiry and something that might have been the beginning of respect. I looked down at the obsidian dust around my feet. I looked at my shoulder, bare and plating free for the first time in my adult life. I looked back at her, at those calm green eyes, at those empty, bare human hands, at the absolute stillness of someone who had done something extraordinary and was treating it like a routine Tuesday. I need to understand what I'm facing. I need to understand it properly. She studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded once, and something in her expression shifted into something I would only learn to recognize much later. It was the look of a teacher who had just found a student worth teaching. "Okay, General," she said quietly. "Then let's begin." I came back the next morning without my armor, not without my shoulder plate. That was gone regardless, swept up by station engineers who had spent most of the previous evening arguing over its molecular structure in 3 different scientific languages. I came back without any of it. I stood in the doorway of the training facility in a plain gray thermal undersuit, bare-plated across my shoulders and arms where the secondary layers hadn't fully closed yet, and I felt, for the first time in 4 decades, genuinely exposed. The observation gallery was even fuller than the day before. Word travels faster than light on a space station when the subject matter is interesting enough, and apparently the complete shattering of a Dralvek general's natural armor by a human instructor's open palm constituted interesting enough by a significant margin. I recognized faces from 3 different wings of the station, all crowded behind the transparent barrier with expressions ranging from scientific fascination to barely concealed panic. Station Chief Xenobiologist Dr. Kel Farron had set up a data station in the corner with equipment I usually only saw deployed for first contact scenarios. She was Vale, which meant she had 12 fingers and the ability to process 6 data streams simultaneously, and right now, all 12 fingers in all 6 streams appeared to be dedicated entirely to the problem of human biology. "General Zorath," she called as I entered, her translator buzzing with urgency. "A moment, please, before you proceed." I walked over, because when a xenobiologist uses that particular tone of voice, you walk over. She pulled up a holographic comparison chart, species anatomical breakdowns, bone density ratings, muscle fiber composition indices. She zoomed to the human entry and highlighted 3 separate data columns in sharp red. "Human skeletal density," she said without preamble, "is approximately 3 times the galactic average for a species of their size. Their muscle fiber arrangement is," she paused, searching for the correct term, "inefficiently efficient, if that makes sense. It should not work as well as it does. The overlapping fiber structure generates force output that exceeds predicted models by a factor of 4. "I am aware," I said, touching my bare shoulder. "I have recent personal data on the subject." "There's more." She pulled up a secondary chart, and I saw the Horvath brothers lean forward in the gallery. "Their homeworld, Earth, gravity classification." The number appeared on the display. "0.98 galactic standard," Parin continued, "which places it within acceptable range on most classification scales. However," she tapped the chart, "0.98 is still nearly 1 full standard unit. Every human alive has spent their entire life fighting against gravity that would slow down most species. Their musculature, their reflexes, their cardiovascular capacity, all of it has been calibrated against a constant physical resistance that our bodies simply do not experience at normal station gravity." She clicked to the next display. Put them in .7 standard, which is what we run on Meridian 7, and you are effectively watching a creature that has trained in resistance gear its entire life suddenly remove all of that resistance at once. The silence in the observation gallery had taken on a distinctly educational quality. They are, Farron said carefully, faster here than they are at home, stronger than their own baseline, and their baseline was already— She looked at her data. She looked at me. She looked back at her data. Alarming. I thanked her, filed the information in the part of my mind that had already begun restructuring its entire threat categorization matrix, and walked onto the training mat. Mara was already there. Same gray uniform, same bare feet, same ceramic cup of warm liquid that she set down on a side table as I approached. She looked rested and unsurprised, which seemed like an unlikely combination given that she had molecularly separated part of my skeleton the previous afternoon. "You came back," she said. I said I would. Most people say a lot of things. She studied me for a moment, then nodded at my bare shoulder. "How's the regeneration?" 40% plating coverage restored. Full restoration in approximately 2 weeks. I paused. It has never required restoration before. "I know. I'm sorry about that. I miscalibrated." She said it plainly, without deflection. "When you charged, I was adjusting for your armor's rated impact resistance, and I overcompensated. The dispersal pattern was wider than I intended." I stared at her. "You were calibrating for my armor's rated impact resistance." "Of course. My armor is rated level 9. "I know." "And you over-calibrated, meaning you applied more force than a level 9 rating required. By accident." She had the decency to look mildly uncomfortable. "It happens when I'm not paying close enough attention to output monitoring. I've been working on it." Something went quietly sideways in my understanding of the universe. "I would like," I said, very carefully, "to try again, properly this time. I want you to stop monitoring your output." The observation gallery made a collective sound that I can only describe as the noise of several species simultaneously reconsidering their life choices. Mara looked at me for a long moment. "No," she said. "That's not what this session is for." Before I could respond, she moved into the center of the mat and settled into her balanced stance. "Today is actual training. Instruction. You're not here to find out how hard I can hit you. You're here to learn how I move and why. There's a difference." She glanced at me over her shoulder. "Come at me, but this time, watch my feet." I came at her. This time, I watched. And the next 4 minutes became the most genuinely educational experience of my military career, delivered primarily through the medium of me being redirected, swept, rerouted, and twice briefly inverted while Mara explained exactly what she was doing and why at every single step. Left foot pivots before the arm engages. That's where the power transfers from ground contact. See it? She stepped around my strike, redirecting my momentum with 2 fingers on my wrist that somehow changed my entire trajectory. "You're generating force vertically. I'm converting it horizontal. You do the work, and I just redirect the destination." She topped my knee. My leg remembered it had options other than staying upright and expressed this opinion loudly. "Nerve cluster. Your species and mine share approximately 60% of peripheral nervous system layout. The clusters are in different locations, but the logic is the same." She caught my arm as I went down, slowing my descent. "I'm not hitting you. I'm sending a message to specific addresses, and your body reads its mail very literally." I hit the mat with rather more grace than the previous day, caught myself, rolled, came back up. She was right where I had last seen her, watching me with those calm green eyes, barely breathing harder than when we'd started. "Better recovery," she noted. "You adjusted your center of gravity between sessions." "I watched your feet," I said, "like you told me." Something moved across her expression. It was brief and might have been subtle to most species, but Dralvek are trained to read combat opponents at granular levels, and I caught it clearly. It was pride. Professional, genuine pride. "Again," she said. We went 4 more rounds. I was dismantled each time, efficiently and without apparent effort. But in the second round, I managed to read one of her redirects before it completed and adjusted my approach. In the third, I landed a glancing contact on her forearm that she acknowledged with a nod. In the fourth, I watched her foot position and identified a pattern. In the fifth round, I hit her. Not hard, not cleanly, a deflected strike off her shoulder that she had clearly allowed to connect at the last moment as a teaching point. But I felt the contact, felt the solidity of it, felt what it was to land something real on something that had been, until that moment, entirely untouchable. She stepped back. "There it is," she said quietly. Then she sat down on the training mat cross-legged with the easy flexibility of someone whose joints operated under entirely different agreements than mine. She looked up at me, and after a moment I sat across from her, which was a strange thing to do in the middle of a training floor with 40 spectators watching, but somehow felt correct. "Tell me about Earth," I said. She looked at me for a moment, as if confirming the question was genuine. Then she talked. She told me about a planet where the sky turned colors it had no business turning, where weather systems the size of continents formed and dissolved in days, where the oceans ran so deep that the creatures living at the bottom had never experienced light in their evolutionary history and had built entirely different survival strategies around the absence of it. She told me about the animals, not as threats, but as context, the pack hunters that had spent millions of years optimizing cooperation, the aerial predators with vision that made Dralvik threat detection look casual, the creatures that had developed chemical weapons sophisticated enough to dissolve organic matter on contact and carried them casually as a standard survival tool. She told me about humans, how they had started without armor, without venom, without natural weapons of particular note, how they had responded to a planet that was actively trying to end them not by finding shelter, but by getting up and trying again and again and again across hundreds of thousands of years, until the trying again had become written into the architecture of every muscle fiber and bone matrix and reflex pathway they possessed. "We don't experience our own strength the way you see it," she said. "We grew up on Earth. Earth is our normal. Coming here," she gestured at the station around us, "this feels easy. It's like taking off a pack you've been wearing so long you forgot you were wearing it." "And the combat training?" I said. "Humans have been training to fight other humans for a very long time," she said, and there was a dryness in her tone that I was beginning to recognize as her version of understatement. "We have approximately 10,000 years of documented close-quarters combat history, different systems, different philosophies, all optimized and cross-referenced and rebuilt and refined until what you end up with is you," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Is me," she agreed, "and every other human in the Defense Forces. We're not exceptional, General. We're baseline. This is what humans are." The observation gallery had gone very still. Even Dr. Farron had stopped working her data displays. I looked at my bare shoulder, where the obsidian was slowly, steadily regrowing. "The Council invited your species in," I said slowly, "because you seemed non-threatening." "I know. You appeared soft, harmless, physiologically unimpressive by most standard metrics." "I know. And you never corrected that assessment." Mara was quiet for a moment. "We corrected it when it mattered, when people needed to know, when being underestimated was causing problems rather than just being," she paused, "convenient." I looked at her. "Were you underestimating me yesterday? Was that convenience?" She held my gaze steadily. "No. Yesterday I was responding to a general who walked into my training facility and publicly questioned my authority in front of 12 other trainees. I was establishing baseline information that the session required. I didn't enjoy it." "But you didn't hesitate." "No." She met my eyes without flinching. "I don't hesitate when students need to learn something essential, even when the lesson is uncomfortable." I sat with that for a moment. 41 years of war, 41 years of measuring threats and calculating margins and never, not once, sitting on a training mat and being told something that reconfigured my entire frame of reference. I laughed. Not the short, dismissive sound I had used yesterday. A real laugh. Genuine. Involuntary. The kind that starts in the ribcage and surprises you on the way out. I laughed until the Horvath brothers started laughing too, and half the observation gallery joined in, and even Shen Vak, bless him, made the sound his species made when something was profoundly absurd in the best possible way. Mara watched me with a smile that was nothing like the knowing one yesterday. This one was open, warm. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "Every day," I said, "for as long as the rotation lasts." She stood up, easy and fluid, and extended her hand. I looked at it. I thought about yesterday. I thought about 11 pounds per square inch and 3 inches of obliterated obsidian and the way the dust had drifted to the mat like black snow. I took her hand. Her grip was careful, precisely, deliberately, thoughtfully careful, and I understood now what that care cost in attention, what concentration it took for her to modulate down to something a colleague could receive, rather than something a fortress would barely register. It was, in its way, the most impressive thing she had done since I met her. She shook my hand once, firm and measured, then let go. "You're a good student, General. You came back." "I had incomplete data," I said. I corrected it. 3 months later, I filed my assessment report with Dralvek High Command. The document ran 47 pages. I titled it without ambiguity, "On Human Combat Capability, a Corrected Threat Classification and Mandatory Advisory for All Iron Dominion Military Personnel." The executive summary contained one paragraph that was quoted more than any other. "Humans are not weak. Humans have never been weak. We looked at them through the lens of our own physiology, our own gravity, our own evolutionary history, and saw softness where there was precision, fragility where there was calibration, harmlessness where there was the most sophisticated restraint in the known galaxy. The danger is not what they are capable of. The danger, or perhaps the miracle, is what they choose to do with it. They choose to teach. They choose to help. They choose every day the harder and slower path of cooperation over the faster and simpler path that their biology would make trivially easy. This is not weakness. This is the most advanced behavior pattern recorded by any species in documented Galactic Council history. I recommend the reclassification of Earth as a Level 4 death world in all military planning documents, and the immediate and enthusiastic expansion of human integration across all Defense Forces training facilities. They are the best instructors I have ever had. They are also, and I say this with complete professional sincerity, the most frightening thing I have ever encountered. These two facts are not in conflict. The report changed things. Slowly at first, then with the velocity of something whose time had come. Human instructors spread through every major training facility. Human medics, human engineers, human diplomats, all of them bringing that same quality that Mara showed on the mat. Precision, patience, and under it, always, that quiet, careful, absolute restraint. I still train with Mara when I'm on Meridian 7. I have gotten better. Not good enough to surprise her, not close enough to land more than she allows me to land, but better. She tells me that real improvement always looks slow from the inside, and that 41 years of one fighting style is not unmade in one season, and coming back matters more than winning. She is right. She is, irritatingly, almost always right. Last week, she told me that someday I might be ready for an unsupported session. No output monitoring, no calibration, just full contact human technique at whatever percentage her body decides to generate. I told her I would think about it. I am still thinking about it. Some data, I have learned, is better acquired in small, carefully managed increments. My shoulder armor grew back, fully restored, smooth and black as a clear night sky, every plate interlocked exactly as it had been before. I keep the scan images from the day she broke it,
stored in a personal file I've labeled Essential Education. Whenever I find myself becoming arrogant, whenever I settle into old assumptions about capability and danger and the size of the things worth fearing, I open that file. I look at the dust, and I remember what gentleness looks like when it comes from genuinely powerful. And I go back to training.